It was June of 1943. The air inside the cockpit of the B-24 was thick and unmoving, heavy with the smell of hydraulic fluid, stale tobacco, and the sweat of 10 men who hadn't slept properly in almost 2 days. Every surface vibrated. Every bolt hummed. The engines didn't roar anymore. They pressed into your bones with a constant numbing force. It was the kind of noise that stops being sound after 8 hours and starts being a physical weight. We were somewhere over the Solomon Islands, returning from a bombing run over Bougainville. The mission itself had been almost disappointingly easy. Light flak, mostly inaccurate. No zeros. No damage worth writing home about. That should have been the warning. That's the first mistake you make in war, believing the danger is always loud, fast, and obvious. Sometimes the thing that kills you is as quiet as a needle moving 2 degrees on a dial. The sun was dropping behind us, turning the Pacific below into a dull sheet of hammered lead. No reflections, no landmarks, just distance. When you're flying over the Pacific, you realize how much of the world is just empty, indifferent water. It's a blue vacuum that waits for you to make a mistake. I was the navigator. My station was a cramped corner of the fuselage, lit by a single bulb that flickered just enough to make every chart look older than it was. I had my maps, my logs, my compass and my stopwatch, dead reckoning, wind estimates. It's a primitive way to stay alive. You're doing high-level math in your head while your body vibrates at 2,000 RPM and your brain is screaming for sleep. You're trying to account for things you can't see, air currents, magnetic declination, the slow, steady pull of the Earth. An hour earlier, the weather had changed. A heavy front rolled in without warning, grey, suffocating and complete. It swallowed the horizon first, then the ocean, then the sky itself. 1 minute we were in a world of orange and blue, and the next we were inside a bale of dirty wool. We lost the stars, we lost the sun, we lost every external reference that mattered. When that happens, you're not flying anymore, you're guessing. You're a blind man in a dark room, trying to find a door that might not even be unlocked. Miller's voice came over the intercom, distorted and thin, like it was being squeezed through a tin can. Navigation. I'm seeing nothing but soup out here. Give me a heading for Henderson Field. I checked my calculations. Airspeed, time, estimated wind drift. I looked at the pencil lines on my map. They looked frail. I gave him a heading of 165 degrees. But even as I spoke, I knew something was wrong. My gut told me the wind was stronger than the morning briefing had said. Stronger and shifting. We were being pushed east minute by minute, mile by mile. I corrected once, then again. I was chasing a phantom position. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. The rhythm of the plane changed when the pilot started fighting the controls. We were flying blind in a metal tube, thousands of feet above an ocean that didn't care if we lived or died. Then the radio crackled. It wasn't the usual chaotic mess of atmospheric static. It wasn't the rhythmic thumping of interference. It was a clean rhythmic pulse, a beacon, a Morse code identifier that cut through the noise like a flashlight in a cellar. "I've got something," Harrison shouted from his station. Our radio operator was a kid from Nebraska who usually kept to himself. Now he sounded relieved, too relieved. "Directional signal. It's faint, but it's steady, south-southeast. That's got to be the base. That's the Henderson beacon." The word base did something to the mood inside that plane. You could physically feel the tension leak out of the fuselage. Shoulders relaxed. Someone in the back laughed softly. The idea of lights, hot coffee, the feeling of solid ground under your boots. It's a powerful drug when you're exhausted. It clouds your judgment. It makes you want to believe. I checked my dead reckoning again. My map said we should be further west. The signal didn't line up with the math. It was coming from much further east than Henderson should have been. "Miller," I said, my voice tight, "the signal is off. It's coming from the wrong quadrant. If we follow that, we're heading into open water or the wrong chain of islands." "The math is just lines on paper, Nav," Miller snapped back. He wasn't being a jerk, he was just tired. He had been holding that yoke for 10 hours. His eyes were probably bleeding from staring at the instruments. "The radio is real. It's a physical signal hitting the antenna. If it's pointing home, we follow it. Harrison, lock it in." So we turned. That decision didn't feel dramatic at the time. There was no cinematic music, no sudden realization of doom, just a gentle banking motion, a shift in the engine pitch, and a new heading. We committed our lives to a sound wave. For the first 30 minutes, it felt right. The signal grew stronger with every mile. Harrison adjusted the receiver, fine-tuning the frequency with careful, trembling hands. The tone stayed clean, consistent, comforting. He looked over at me and smiled. Actually smiled, and said it reminded him of the clear transmitter they had back in Brisbane. I didn't smile back. I was looking at the fuel gauges. At that point, we had less than 90 minutes of fuel remaining. No one announced it over the intercom, but I could hear the silence of the crew. They were all watching the same needles. They don't move fast, those needles. They never do. They just slide slowly and relentlessly toward the red. It's a slow-motion execution. An hour passed. We should have seen something by then. Even through the heaviest cloud cover, a major airfield like Henderson throws off light. It has a glow, a suggestion of civilization that bleeds through the mist. There was nothing, just the grey, the endless, suffocating grey. "Harrison," I said, "ask them for a weather update. Tell them we're low on juice and need the ceiling height." He keyed the transmitter and sent the request in Morse. We waited. The seconds felt like hours. Then the reply came back almost immediately. A series of tones, precise and perfectly spaced. "They say the ceiling's low," Harrison reported. 800 feet, but the runway's clear. They're telling us to stay on the heading. They're bringing us in." I felt a knot in my stomach. Something wasn't right. The phrasing of the Morse response felt too rehearsed. "Harrison," I whispered, "did they give today's recognition code? The one from this morning's briefing?" Silence. The engines filled the gap. The steady mechanical thunder of 4 Pratt & Whitneys, doing exactly what they were built to do, unaware that they were being fed a lie. "They used the old call sign," Harrison said, his voice barely audible over the hum. "They used last week's. Date, the cold that hit me then, had nothing to do with the altitude or the lack of a heater. It was a cold that starts in your marrow. In 1943, the Japanese weren't just fighting with planes and ships. They were smart, they were observant, they listened to our frequencies, they captured our downed radios. They knew that a lost, starving American crew would follow any voice that sounded like home. They had moved mobile transmitters onto small, jagged islands, or placed them on ships just to act as sirens. They understood one simple truth. A man who is afraid of drowning will climb onto a sword if you tell him it's a ladder. "Miller," I said, keeping my voice flat to keep from shaking, "break the heading. Now, turn to 280. "We don't have the fuel to hunt, Nav," Miller shouted back. The fatigue had turned into desperation. "If we turn away from the only signal we've got, we're dead. This is it. This is our only chance. It's not ours, Miller. They're baiting us." I stood up, unbuckling my harness, and crawled forward toward the cockpit. I had to grip the metal ribs of the plane as turbulence rocked us. I pointed at the fuel gauge for engine number 3. The needle was trembling just above the red line. We had been flying toward that signal for nearly 2 hours. 2 hours of burning our lifeblood to get further away from safety. "Check signal strength, Harrison," I yelled. "It's pegged," he cried out. "We're right on top of it. We should be over the runway right now." Miller wiped the condensation from the windscreen with his sleeve. His face was pale, his eyes sunken. He pushed the nose down, forcing the heavy bomber to dive, dropping us beneath the cloud layer to see what the radio had promised us. At 1,200 feet, we broke through. The world appeared. There was no runway, no island, no Henderson Field. No tents, no jeeps, no friendly faces. There was a ship, a single dark silhouette cutting the surface of the empty ocean, unmistakable, angular, purpose-built, a Japanese destroyer sitting alone in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't moving. It wasn't even firing its anti-aircraft guns. It was just sitting there, silent and predatory, broadcasting that clean, steady, unmistakably American signal. They didn't need to shoot us down. They already knew they'd won. They had watched us on their radar for 200 miles, watching us follow their lie like a dog on a leash. They knew our fuel state. They knew we couldn't circle. They were just waiting for gravity and the ocean to finish the job for them. They were witnesses to our mistake. Miller didn't say a word. He didn't curse. He didn't scream. He banked hard to the west and pushed the throttles forward until the levers hit the stops, wringing every last drop of power the engines had left. No heading. No argument. Just a blind, frantic instinct to get away from that ship. The intercom went silent. The relief we'd felt earlier wasn't just gone, it had turned into a poison. We had been fooled, not by superior tactics or better technology, but by our own desire to be safe. We had trusted a ghost. 20 minutes later, engine 4 began to cough. It was a wet, sputtering sound. Then number 2 followed. The vibration of the plane changed. It lost its rhythmic hum and became a jagged, dying stutter. The sound of power was gone, replaced by the sound of failing metal. "Get ready," Miller said. His voice was incredibly calm now. The panic was over because the outcome was certain. We didn't make it back. We didn't even make land. We ditched 5 miles off a nameless atoll as the last of the light faded from the sky. The impact felt like hitting a concrete wall at 100 miles an hour. Metal screamed as it tore. The nose section, where I had been standing just moments before, snapped off like a dry twig. Water rushed in, black, freezing, and tasting of high-octane gasoline and salt. It's a smell I still encounter in my dreams. I don't remember the logistics of getting out. I don't remember unbuckling or finding a hatch. I just remember the sudden, terrifying silence of being underwater, and then the explosion of air as I hit the surface. I made it. Harrison made it. Miller made it. 6 of the others didn't. They were probably still in their stations, maybe still wearing their headsets, listening to the static of a signal that had led them into the dark. We drifted on a yellow rubber raft for 3 days. The Pacific sun is a different kind of enemy. It peels the skin off your face in layers. It turns your tongue into a piece of dry leather. We barely spoke. There wasn't anything left to say. We just watched the horizon, 3 men who had been led to their deaths by a radio. When the PBY Catalina finally found us, they asked what happened. They asked if we'd been jumped by Zeros. They asked if the engines had failed. Miller just looked at them. He didn't say anything. Those 6 men aren't listed as combat deaths in the official records. There was no enemy fire, no dramatic dogfight. They are just names on a list. Missing in action, non-combat related. A navigation error. A radio malfunction. But I know what it really was. It was a lie. We were tired, we were scared, and we wanted to believe that the world was kinder than it actually was. We followed the voice we wanted to hear instead of the math we knew was true. That's how most people die in a war, not in a blaze of glory, but in the quiet space between a tired man's decision and the reality he refuses to see. I still hear that signal sometimes. When the house is quiet and the radio in the kitchen is between stations, that steady, rhythmic pulse, it sounds so much like home. But I know better now. I don't follow it. I just sit in the dark and wait for the silence to return.